if I can get you to comply and do what I want you to do, whether it's through manipulation tactics, bullying, coercion, even violence or threats of violence, then I get to maintain power and control over whatever it might be, whether it's a classroom or a city or your family even, or something at work or this country. That power is so alluring that we will attempt in every way to subjugate people.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a very special guest today, author, podcaster, veteran, Order of Men's, Ryan Michler. How's it going, buddy?
What's up? What's up, man? We did one yesterday, so it's good to run it back today.
Well, that was that's a different situation over there with
that's different from anything. Like there's nothing quite like that. So
I've literally made Dave Rubin blush on that show, which is
Is that right?
Like of all the shit, I've done a lot of cool shit in my life and I've accomplished a couple of things, but the thing that I'm most proud of is making Dave Rubin blush, honestly.
Yeah. Some of that stuff, it's wild. It was good though. I enjoy it. It's definitely outside of my comfort zone, so it's good for me.
Yeah, we're if anything, we're helping you, I think, is what it is.
I'm getting better every day, getting better by going on your guys' shows.
I don't know if that's accurate, but let's get into this.
We'll run with that.
Yeah. So this show, I don't know how much. I think we sent you over the prospectus and everything, but
yeah,
the general idea is, and it's something that I've been doing for a while without saying it out loud, and what a lot of people, including yourself, have been focusing on. There's a lot of negativity in the world, generally speaking, especially in the West. I guess maybe not especially in the West, but especially for us, because we're in the West, we experience that the most. There's a lot of dumb shit that happens on a day-to-day basis. The erosion of family and American values, generally speaking. A lot of people in power who take advantage of other people and blah, blah, blah. And, a lot of people have made careers off of pointing that out. And look, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but what we didn't want to be is just another voice, screaming in the wilderness about how fucked up everything is. Because who are we helping if we're doing that? So we wanted.
Yeah, it becomes a bit of an echo chamber for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and the net result is just more negativity, unless you're providing some kind of solution based effort. So yourself. Chris Williamson is a guy that I think does it really well. Maj Toure with Black Guns Matter does it really well. Like he actually does stuff to help the community and stuff like that. So that's what this show is, and we organize it around these 11 principles that, you've seen, the audience is very familiar with, but even more so than just the principles, we've organized it around this idea that you can either be a subject under rule and whine about your rights all the time, or you can secure your rights by, taking care of your responsibilities, and you can be a citizen. Those are the two choices I think you have in a modern republic. And one of the bigger issues, I think, is the way we treat men and what we as men expect from ourselves and from other men. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about yourself first and how you got into all this.
Yeah, I was probably the former, the type of guy that you're talking about. I was raised primarily by my mother. My dad really wasn't in the picture. The father figures that I did have weren't great role models for me. So I carried a lot of that baggage, even till today. Like I've been doing a lot of just trying to figure out myself, like really get deep into my own insecurities over the past couple of months. And I'm even realizing things about myself that I didn't know, that I buried down forever, or I latched on to some unhealthy perspective of masculinity, or some unhealthy coping mechanisms that make me reliant on other people for external validation. A lot of stuff I'm even uncovering now, and I've been in this space, so to speak, for 7 years. I've written books on it. I've done 900 podcasts with quote unquote manly men trying to figure all this stuff out. frankly, I've put myself in the position of leadership and trying to tell people what would be helpful for them. And I'm like, damn, I don't even have this stuff figured out. And so, yeah, I'm on a path, man, trying to figure out what it means to be a man, how I can be a value add to my community, how I can serve my family, how I can serve people who look to me for leadership. And it's been a roller coaster. It's been ups and downs and highs and lows, but man, I'm glad to be here. I feel like it's like I tell people it's like that Rogaine commercial, those old Rogaine where it's like, I'm not only the president, I'm a client.
That's the hair club for men.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Hair club for men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's
remember
me,
that.
dude.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really funny.
That's me. I'm like, I'm not only the founder of Order of Man, I'm the biggest recipient and I'm the guy that needs it more than anybody else. So, man,
Sure.
I'm just trying to figure it out myself.
Well, Gandhi said if you truly want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I actually talked about this on the last show I did, but it's easy to see that as like a platitude or some woo-woo bullshit, but and it's not just it's not just an altruistic thing. Like, yeah, I'm going to help people, and through helping people, I'll help myself. That is literally how human civilization is designed to operate. You know what I mean? Like, we need each other. We need each other, and if you want to reduce it to mechanics, think of identifying a problem in your own life or a problem in society that affects you and trying to solve that for others as a means of solving it to yourself, almost as workshopping or outsourcing or crowdsourcing the problem, right? Like, you're getting a larger data set. You're getting a lot of people's opinions. You're bouncing ideas off of each other. You're actually trying things in the space and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and coming to not only a better understanding of how to get the job done, how to make it work, but also a better understanding of the people that are around you, right? So not only do you have the understanding of how to make things work, but you have a fundamental understanding of the issues involved, which means when things change down the road, you still have that base of information that you can operate from and solve new problems.
Well, and one of the things I found, let me talk about a trap I've
Okay.
identified that I've fallen into over the past couple of years. Uh, and that is that, yeah, I started Order of Men with the goal of trying to figure out some things with myself, but
Mm.
also, like you said, in service to other men who I knew were going through a lot of the same issues. And I think it's very easy when you start to have some level of success to believe that you're the Messiah, right? That you're like, oh, I'm here to save everybody else. And all of a sudden, what started as humility, which is I want to serve people, becomes pride and arrogance, which means I have served others. Look how great I am.
Mm.
And then pride comes before the fall, and
Mm.
something happens in our own personal life, or we deal with some stuff that life inevitably throws at us, and we realize, as I have over the years, that I'm not the Messiah, and
Mm.
and I am not God's gift to the men I'm trying to serve. I'm the guy that needs the most help. But then the other cool thing I've noticed is as I go through my own baggage and my own bull crap, is I can literally look at what I've been able to create over 7 years and say, holy cow, there's the path.
Mm.
Like I've got this new book coming out. We talked about it on our podcast yesterday, the Masculinity Manifesto. Bro, I'm telling you, one of the most painful things I've done is reading that book for the audio version of the book, because as I read it, I was like, oh shit, I'm not doing that. Oh man, I'm not good in that department. Oh crap, I failed there. Oh man, I need work there. And I felt like a hypocrite as I read the dang thing, like the whole thing. I'm like, man, I struggle in all of this stuff. And so I feel hypocritical on one hand. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh, well, that's actually true though. Like what I wrote, even though I may fail to live up to that, that's actually accurate. Oh, that exercise or that strategy or that thought, that's accurate. And now I have this path or this framework that's proven to work for other men, and now I've just got to implement it in my own life. So I created the solutions to my own problems before I realized they were even problems.
Right. And that's kind of, I mean, but you were in the military. How is that different from a PCC or a PCI, right? Like
Right.
you have these inspections and checks that, I mean, there's a reason there's a bomb threat checklist next to every phone in the government. You know what I mean? Literally laminated to the table, because no matter how good you are at something, you have blind spots. I think pride is probably one of the bigger blind spots for people,
Totally.
pride, fear, things like that, but certainly pride in this case. And, having it all laid out like that is super helpful. I think it's why, your work has been successful. People like Jordan Peterson, having a list with concrete examples of how to behave, you know what I mean, it's not just beneficial for the reader. I believe it is beneficial for the author as well. Now, not everybody's going to be an author, obviously, because, well, maybe they will. Fuck, I don't know. It's a lot of work. I'll tell you that much, and you know that
It
personally.
is.
But not everybody's going to be an author, but you can be the author of your own life. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
You shouldn't be waiting back for things to happen to you. You know what I mean? You should be out there looking proactively for opportunities to improve yourself. And this is one of the ways is to, like with Andy Frisella, the 75 hard thing, challenge yourself with stuff. And you're gonna find out things about yourself that will help you, but also will help other people. And this is what Gandhi meant by this. Like you're the living example by you identifying and trying to solve a problem for other people. You have effectively created a device in perpetuity that will help you solve your problems as well. This is exactly what the man was talking about. You know what I mean?
Well, and you were talking about some of these acronyms. It's been a long time since I've been in the military, but like, what did you say? PCM or PCs?
PCC
I can't remember.
Pre-combat check and pre-combat inspection. Yeah.
Okay. So I wrote down a word here that we need to make sure we remember is preventative. Like that's the problem that we fall into is we start buying our own bull crap. And then we don't do these preventative types of checks and maintenance and evaluation. And we only evaluate after something happens. It's like, bro, I'm not talking to anybody else. I'm talking to myself. It's like, bro, you should have been doing this the entire time.
Right.
And if you wouldn't have found yourself in this position, but you do because you didn't do this preventative stuff that you should have been doing all along.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the difference for me, at least, as somebody who both commentates on, both political and social stuff, and somebody who is I guess a consumer of people who do that as well. The people that I really respect are the ones who, are using this as a device for themselves as well. You know what I mean? Like it's, what do we say? Sweat and training prevents blood shed in combat. That's a very popular phrase. And, but it's not a new phrase. You know what I mean? Like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That I believe that comes from the Middle Ages. So it's like people have been thinking about this shit for a very long time. And there may not be any new novel discoveries to be made. I think if you just based your life on Greek and Roman philosophy, to be honest, you could probably get by pretty well. You know what I mean? Like we seem to have this this tendency to unlearn and unsolve problems that we've solved. But the reality is that we just the goal for modernity is to take these classic lessons, in my opinion anyways, to take these classic lessons, and your job is to try to find ways to make them fit with modernity. You know what I mean? Like, well, how do I apply these lessons from the Stoics to my life today? I can't just wander off into the woods somewhere and start ignoring everybody. I've got a life to live. I've got a family. I need to do
that.
These
Actually
things.
Sounds pretty good.
Well,
though.
It does. Yeah. But like it
ain't going to work.
No, of course not. So, I mean, eventually somebody's going to come find you. And that's why, that's why, people like us exist. But, it is interesting. I think that we've kind of shifted from a discovery phase in human philosophy and psychology into an application phase. And I'm not sure everybody is keen on that. I don't know if people are really aware of what's happening, because a lot of people feel like they're still in the discovery phase. And I think that is producing a lot of people who are like career students, which is, there's nothing wrong with it. You should always be learning, but career students of politics and philosophy and ethics, but they're not as nearly as engaged in the process of actually affecting the world around them as they should be, right? So I think this live and let live attitude that people like you and me and a lot of others have, it's probably outlived its usefulness, because now there are bad actors all over the place trying to dissolve what's important to us.
Well, I think I actually might take a little bit of issue with that,
Okay.
in that I think there were some great men that have come before who have applied a lot of these lessons, which is why we have the things that we do. Technology, the ease of modernity, like you're talking about, these creature comforts. I got my fan going right now. I got these lights and this technology here where you're in Texas, I'm in Maine. Like we're basically, but it feels like we're in the same room or even just rooms next door to each other. I mean, some amazing things
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't earn for ourselves. And that's the problem, is that we have all of this ease of modernity that we didn't earn for ourselves, and we get to reap the benefit of somebody else's hard work. And now we can sit around on our asses and just utilize what somebody else created without
Sure.
having to go out and earn it. So the problem to me is that people did apply a lot of what was being learned: hard work, resilience, sacrifice, commitment, dedication. And now I don't need to do any of that.
Sure.
I just get to sit back and be that perpetual student like you're talking about, or have somebody else pay my mortgage.
Well, it
And
seems
that
like
to me
that.
is the biggest problem.
But it seems like that, right? It seems like we don't have anything left to do, but it's very clear to me that we do have plenty to
Absolutely.
do, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's the trick is that we have so much to lose. Like our backs aren't really against the wall. And so we become complacent.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if we wake up, there's actually a lot that you can do and a lot that you should do. People occasionally will message me and say, "Oh, I wish I had your job. You just sit around and talk to cool people or dink around on social media." Like, bro, you can have my job. Like, you just create it. 7 years ago, when I started talking about this stuff, it wasn't my job. It was something that I created, that people of course helped me along the way, and technology, and I utilized and harnessed the right resources and tools. But that was me, like you're saying, going out and doing something that was useful enough that it became my career and occupation. And we've been handsomely rewarded for doing so, not only because we're helping people, but now we have a profitable business in the thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of, this brings me to the first of the principles I wanted to wedge into this show today. And it's, I'll put more into this country than I take out of it. And it's, kind of based on the Boy Scout, leave things better than how you found them. Not as good as you found them, but better than you found them. Right. I think that's the critical difference. We're kind of just coasting right now on the momentum of our ancestors, and it's rapidly slowing down. Like our progress is rapidly. Like I don't mean progress like progressivism. I mean our progress as a species is slowing down because of that. And I want to talk to you. I want you to talk about this in the context of what's going on with men in society today, right? And from a 3-year-old boy until adulthood, it's not focused on one generation or another. It's an onslaught, for lack of a better phrase. So, I'll put more into this country than I take out of it. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think what's happening is that there's the powers that would be, primarily the government, and then there's other actors or institutions, whether it's academia or public school system, even the medical community, that have got media that have gotten in on this and perpetuated this idea that big government or big daddy will take care of you. And that to me is the biggest issue, is like, hey, don't strain yourself, don't exert yourself. If you aren't doing what you should be doing, it's okay. We get it. Life is hard. It's a challenge. There's struggles. You've been oppressed. You've been victimized. You've been this. You don't have that opportunity. And so just sit back and we'll take care of it. And so if you promote this idea from the time that you're a child and you start going into the public school system, for example, and you grow up believing that somebody's going to rescue you, somebody's going to save you. If you get into trouble, you're not going to have to deal with any consequences. I mean, why would you exert yourself? Because exerting yourself is painful. It's hard work. It takes effort. We've got an event this weekend that we're doing, and I'm like, my hat's dusty, my shirt's kind of dusty. I don't do hard, laborious work by any stretch of the imagination, but we're out there cleaning up my barn and vacuuming it all up. And my kids are out there and they're like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, hey, if you want to go to the fair today, like, this is how you earn your ride wristband. It's like, right, you come out here and you vacuum and you pick stuff up and you set up tables and you set up chairs. And this is what we do. But it's not easy to do that stuff. But the downside is that you don't receive any of the benefit. When you talk about, I'm going to put more into this country than I take out of it, that's not entirely selfish. selfless, because when you actually put more into something, you get more out of it.
Yeah,
You get more
imagine that.
pride,
Imagine that.
satisfaction. Well, I'll give you a small silly example. I've got quite a bit of property, my family and I do, and I walk every single morning. I get up and I go walk, and around the property is exactly 1 mile. If I stay on the perimeter of the property, it's exactly 1 mile around. And as I walk, I find trash. I might
Mm,
find a beer can or a trash bag or a Taco Bell bag or whatever, that just because it's on near the side of the road, that kind of blows onto the property. And I used to just walk by and just like step over it, like, because I didn't want to pick it up. It's like, just step over it, it'll blow onto somebody else's property or whatever.
mm-hmm,
And even just over the past 3, 4, 5 months, every time I walk, man, I pick that up.
mm-hmm.
It's not only is it my property, it's like, I don't want it to blow onto somebody else's property. I'd like this area to look nice. And it's a small, silly example of making something better than you found it. But then when you throw all that trash in the trash can, there's a sense of pride and
Sure.
satisfaction. Your property looks good. You feel useful,
Mm-hmm.
not like a sack of shit, but that you actually did something useful and productive, and you gave back and you contributed. And then when I go out into the field, my wife, she's got this zero turn. She drives around and loves the thing. When she goes out and she maintains the field, it looks so beautiful. We can go out there and really enjoy what we've created because her and I have put so much effort and work into the property.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of like broken window theory, which is a criminology
Yeah.
theory that like if you keep things looking nice and take care of them, then people will treat them nicely, right? That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of it is the IKEA effect, which is this psychological principle that's proven people are more likely to take personal ownership of something, to feel purpose in doing it or being around it or whatever it is, if they assemble even just the last 20% of it, right? Like
Mm.
if you send me all the parts and I just build it at home myself, I feel like I built that. You know what I mean? Even though I
Hmm.
only did the very last part of it. And these things play a big role. The people ask me a lot, over the years, what's the purpose of this or what's the purpose of that? I think one of the more fundamental questions in life is what's the purpose of life? And the purpose of life is purpose. You know what I mean? Like I hate to be I hate to do that. I hate to use a word in its own definition, but the purpose of life is indeed purpose. And it's going to be like if you're the purpose of masculinity is to provide and protect, right? There's a lot of different
Agreed.
ways to do that. You can protect people by being an engineer and building infrastructure, by being a doctor and developing medicine, or treating people, by being a soldier, by being a cop, by being a statesman, that helps protect against existential threats. There's all kinds of ways to do that. There's all kinds of ways to provide: hunting, gathering, cooking, all sorts of stuff like that. Or even in the economy, as a finance person, making sure our economy is doing well, you're providing there as well. There's a lot of ways to do it. But the purpose is to find how you, with your particular experience and skill set, and also what you enjoy doing, because that's important. You don't want to fucking be ice skating uphill your whole fucking life. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
that's gonna
Right.
suck. But this is very clearly the purpose of life. But we have rapidly shifted over the last like 30 years into this self-care, pat myself on the back. Oh, I did a good job today. I'm going to take a mental health day bullshit, which I think it is the most poisonous attitude that you could possibly have in a culture, to be honest, because it diverts your attention from using everything. Like, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in shit, but I do believe that whatever you are capable of, you are responsible to do for other people, whatever it is, because that's how society works. I wonder why we taught kids. You mentioned it before. Why did we teach kids that the system is there for them to lean on, and that somebody's going to be there to save them, instead of teaching them that it's their responsibility to be part of the infrastructure that saves everybody else? You know what I mean? Like, that might seem
Yeah.
like a subtle distinction, but it's really important to me, because it's a difference between all of society focusing on me and then me focusing on all of society.
I think there's two reasons. So let's hit them both. Number one, comfort. It's way easier to get people to conform than it is to actually have to teach them how to live their lives. So let me give you an example. Your kids maybe acting up, acting out, being a kid, being a little jerk maybe, or whatever. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're screaming, throwing a temper tantrum, and you need them to clean their room. And so you tell them, hey, I need you to clean your room. And they're like, why? I don't want to clean my room. And they throw a hissy fit and they start back talking you. And what do you say? Because I said so. So you get them to conform, right? And you can get them to conform by dangling something over them, whether it's a reward or you threaten to take something away, like you're going to be restricted or no electronics or whatever that might be. And all of a sudden, you get them to toe the line. So now you're getting compliance from them because you can hold something over them, but you're not getting commitment. You're not getting buy-in on that.
Sure.
Versus actually sitting down and explaining why we want to have a clean room, why we want to take pride in our things, why it's important to have a clean room because you can find the things that you need. And so it's like way harder to actually teach people to think for themselves and to critically analyze scenarios than it is just to say, just do it. So that's number one. We're lazy. That's it. Number two, which is much more nefarious, is power. If I can get you to comply and do what I want you to do, whether it's through manipulation tactics, bullying, coercion, even violence or threats of violence, then I get to maintain power and control over whatever it might be, whether it's a classroom or a city or your family even, or something at work or this country. That power is so alluring that we will attempt in every way to subjugate people. But we can't come out and just do it blatantly, just say, no, you're going to comply or else. So we create these little systems of getting people to toe the line and do what they're supposed to do and color within the lines and sit down and shut up. And it's very hard to detect at times and very easy to detect at others what people are doing. But that's what's happening.
Yeah, for
we're
sure.
lazy and we're power hungry.
Yeah, it's primary education in America for at least the last 100 years has been specifically designed towards that end, right?
Of course.
Rockefeller and Henry Ford had a big part to play in that through, a lot of the economic foundation of the early 20th century was these two guys, kind of battling back and forth with labor movements. And but Rockefeller was pretty clear that we don't want a brilliant, educated, independent workforce. We want people who are just smart enough to run the machines, who are making just enough money to buy our products back from us, right? And if you look at public education, it is designed specifically to spit out compliant workers, not thinkers,
Right.
not innovators, compliant workers. Think about if your kids ever went to public school. I don't know if they did. I assume they don't now.
They don't now, but they did.
So if you had gone to a parent-teacher conference at some point and you say, is my child a good student? And the teacher says, yes. The implication is that they're quiet, right? They do what they're told. They do their work on time, but nothing about, they always come with a fresh perspective, or they challenge my way of thinking because they're really, analytical and critical, or skeptical or whatever. Like, those are the things that you need to be, but those are
Right.
things that will get you in trouble in a fucking public classroom. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, it doesn't make sense that we do that, but it makes sense why it happens. And I've heard people, because I've been openly critical about the public school system, but I've heard people say, well, teachers, not all teachers are bad and all this. I agree. I think the overwhelming majority of teachers truly want to help students. They have noble intentions. They do care about their kids. Like, I agree with all that, of course. But where did these people learn what their operating systems for life? In the public school system.
Well, you can talk
they went
to
through the same thing.
Yeah, you can talk to Corey DeAngelis about this and about the higher education that primary educators go to, and how they are basically like lobotomy factories that teach them a specific way of education that, promotes a lot of the weird shit that, people across the country in school board meetings have been fighting back against, but also just what you're talking about, which is, in my opinion, it's just from the educator's perspective, I think it's either it's laziness or incompetence or fear of doing something different. That's really what it is. And it's from their perspective, I understand it, because the entire weight of the weight of the entire system is working against them to do the right thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of peer pressure in that to conform a certain way. But it is interesting because it's a vocal minority that controls the pressure. Like
Sure.
that
Yeah.
that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's like, and I don't know what the number is, but you could have 10 or 15 or maybe even 20, which I think is high, percent of school teachers advocating some of these woke ideologies. And then the rest of the people, the 80% are like, okay, well, I guess we better. No, screw that.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to it. But that peer pressure, man, or that fear of being outed for something you're not, whether that's a bigot or a racist or a homophobe or a transphobe or any number of accusations people could levy against you, is is very enticing to toe the line, so you're not called those things.
Yeah, and I
Very
think we
interesting.
saw it in broader society over the last 2 years as well. Like that almost fundamentalism of compliance made itself very clear over the past 2 years and how successful they've been at programming people, because a lot of stuff that the government has said and done over the past 2.5 years or so has been absolutely ludicrous, just
Right.
not absolute nonsense. And people, you know, and well, a lot of people just accepted it right off the bat, which I think those people are NPCs. I don't think those are even real people. But a lot of people in the medicine community, in education and policing and the military, they just accepted this stuff because they were afraid of what the consequences were. And these are people who are typically, especially the police and military side, who are typically risk takers, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be in those jobs. They are very frequently independent thinkers, contrary to popular belief. The military isn't just a bunch of fucking yes men, or it wasn't until recently, anyways. But because they had been trained institutionally for throughout their entire lives to accept a certain level of authority over their day-to-day lives, it was easier to manipulate them into doing something that they knew they shouldn't do. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's a big
Right.
fucking problem for me. Like, you know as well as I do, especially in the military, and especially when things start to get when the power vacuum starts to get really high, it's really important for people on the ground, sergeants and field grade officers, to say no when an order doesn't make sense, to protect their own people, to protect the mission, to protect our fucking country. And there was nobody there to say no this time. It's very worrying for me.
Well, I was writing some things down, like why why somebody would obey an order they know is unequivocally wrong. And I would say this is they lack, how should I say it? They lack independence, maybe is
Mm,
the best way to say it. I wrote down here that they have no skills, they have no prospects, they have no money, and they have no values.
right.
And if you are devoid of a skill set, other prospects, money, like financial acumen, and a spine or some values that you operate your life by, then you're forced to say yes. You're forced to comply because you have no other option. And that's why a police officer who's asked to enforce some things maybe they don't like, and it's like, well, I don't get to make the laws that I enforce. Right, you don't, but you get to decide whether or not you work there. Well, Ryan, I've got a mortgage. I've got bills. I've got a family. Look, I know. So do I. So does just about everybody. Is it okay that you're just making it by, that you're you have to sacrifice your principles because you have to make your mortgage payment? I mean, I
Sure.
get it. I understand, but let's not put ourselves in that position,
Mm,
so that if we ever are forced or even just asked to compromise ourselves, we're not in the position, because we do have other skill sets.
yeah.
We do have prospects. We do have financial acumen and abundance set aside. We do have values. We do have a network. This goes right into what you're talking about with the values that you sent over to me,
Mm,
or the principles rather. Like now I had an advisor once call it an FU fund,
hmm.
and he had literally had $1 million set aside in bank accounts. Wasn't earning any, just bank accounts. And I said, why that much money? He's like, so at any time, if I'm ever asked to compromise my values or jeopardize my beliefs, I can flip somebody off and say, screw you, because they had the ability to do that over here on the side.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it, it's also kind of a slippery slope too, right? Like if right now in this moment to avoid some marginal discomfort, or let's call it even a major discomfort to your life, you're willing to compromise your principles. Every time you do something like that, it gets easier to do it again, right? And
Yeah. Setting a precedent.
yeah, and then not only that, but the other side, the coercive side, now has the expectation that you can be coerced, right? So it's like there's nothing stopping them from trying again and trying with a larger degree of pressure against you and to get you to do something far worse. You know what I mean?
Well, I have some experience in that, because I was talking about it earlier with the things I'm figuring out about myself.
Mm,
And, I'm trying to be as authentic or transparent as I can be in this. Is one of the things that I personally do is I really seek external validation. Like I crave that I didn't think I did, but clearly I do. And I do it to the degree where I'm not even willing to identify my own personal boundaries, or uphold my personal boundaries. And so it's no wonder that if we don't have boundaries that we're able to communicate and enforce with other people, whether that's your spouse or your children or coworkers or complete strangers, then that's where it starts.
mm,
Like, why wouldn't you do that? And for me, it's because of external validation. So if I want to come on this podcast because I want to be friends with you, and I want the notoriety, the acumen, or I want you to think a certain way of me, and you show up 15 minutes late, if I'm so worried about this external validation, I'm gonna be like, oh, it's okay, like 15 minutes late, no big deal. Well,
mm.
no, man, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, I got other stuff I've got to do. I show up on time. You say this time, I show up. We take an hour or whatever the agreed upon time, because I value myself enough that I have other things to do. And I've canceled podcasts with people that I would love to have a podcast with, because they're like, hey man, like, I'm gonna be late. I only have a half an hour. No deal.
Yeah.
I decline.
Yeah.
They're like,
Same.
well, I'm like, well, you can reschedule. And I give people an opportunity. Like, let's reschedule. I get it. Things come up. But I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to devalue what I do because you can't manage your schedule correctly. Mm. And that's a boundary that I have.
Sure. Yeah.
But so many of us don't have those. And I know, like, we're talking about it on the podcast at a greater level, but if you can't do it at a personal level, like, nothing else really matters.
Now, setting those boundaries though is a function of having the safety net that you described. And it's not a safety net that anybody's going to provide for you. Having skills and prospects and a set of principles and a good network and, healthy finance capabilities, that's all stuff you got to do yourself. You know what I mean?
Right.
And,
right.
Some people are going to read the lack of patience, maybe, if you want to call it that, as maybe rude or whatever the fuck. But in reality, this is what the social contract is. Everybody knows the rules, and you're expected to follow the rules. And if you can't, then that's too bad. And if things don't go well that day, if I'm able to, sometimes, maybe I'll make an exception.
Sure.
If the cause makes sense. But I've had people show up late and expect to still be able to get what they want out of the deal. Right now, that's
Right.
a problem. Or people who have canceled multiple times on short notice, they're now off my list forever. Like, I'll never book that person. And
Right.
it's not about being a dick. It's about, like, you have to have these. It's like having walls on your house. You have to have these foundational principles to hold the weight up, to keep the shit out. You know what I mean? That's how it works.
And I don't think you said lack of patience, and I could see how it would be interpreted that way. But honestly, that's a bit of a weak interpretation if people think that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've felt that way before. Like, I have been intimidated by others because they're so sure of themselves and they have their personal boundaries and they don't let those things be crossed. And then I interpret it because I'm insecure as being a dick or being an asshole or being an impatience. And really, that's not it at all. Like, let's take the podcasting thing. Okay. If you show up half an hour late, And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it because I only have a half an hour because I've got another meeting that
Mm.
I committed to. Okay, that like not only am I honoring myself by keeping to my schedule, I'm actually trying to honor you because I want to have an hour with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to give you an hour on my platform to share your message, and I'm honoring you. And so by cutting it short, not only am I dishonoring my boundaries and myself, I'm dishonoring you,
And the product, by the way, which is kind of the point in the first place. You know
the
what I mean?
audience, right?
Yeah. That's
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
it's ultimately about the work product. Like you want to do a deal with somebody and you're like, well, this is my capability, and okay, on my side, this is my need. Do they match up? No. All right, no hard feelings. That's how it goes. Like you wouldn't make business deals like that
Right.
because it doesn't make any. Well, if you do, you're a bad business person, so you shouldn't be making business deals like that. But it's very obvious in the business setting that I have a certain list of requirements, and I'm going out to a vendor or whomever it is and trying to get them to fulfill it, and this vendor can't fulfill it. Hey, that's just the way it is, man. That's how life works, and very obvious in that scenario. But why? When we come back to social issues or our personal relationships or whatever it is, we don't seem to have the capability to apply that same logic that, hey, there's no hard feelings. This just isn't going to work out. You know what I mean?
Because we're just overly sensitive.
Mm.
I think we're just, and again, it comes back to that external validation. Like, oh man, if I don't do this, they're going to think poorly of me. Yeah, they might actually. And look, I'm
Yeah,
saying this, but I fall into that trap all the time
mm,
because I'm looking for external validation. I'm like, oh, I don't want that guy to think poorly of me.
sure.
So I'll just do it. But then the ironic thing is, you actually end up thinking poorly of me because I don't uphold my boundaries.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, you may not
like,
say it out like if I
no,
cancel because you're late, you might say, hey, that guy's like got a short fuse. He's kind of a dick. He's whatever. But if you and maybe that lasts for some amount of time or whatever, but if you just let it go, then in the back of that person's mind they know that you're not the kind of person that holds to a standard. You know what I mean? I think that's an
totally.
important thing. Most communication is nonverbal, 85+%. And it's the same and whether it's business or whether it's personal relationships or whatever the fuck, the way you behave, and you kind of hinted at it earlier about teaching your kids this because I said so nonsense, or do what I say, not what I do. Man, that's never gonna
Mm-hmm.
fucking work. That
Yeah.
is the weakest form of leadership, is to just tell people what to do and not live that life yourself.
I don't think it's even lead. I mean, look, we all fall into that trap. So I'm not trying to put myself on some pedestal I don't belong, but
Mm,
I don't think that's leadership. I think that's closer to tyranny or dictatorship
sure.
than it is leadership. Because in order to lead, people do have to follow you. That's an element of leadership, but they have to voluntarily do it. They
Mm,
have to have a say in the matter. Because if they don't have a say in the matter because you're holding something over their head, whether that's a paycheck or sex, might be one with a spouse or whatever it could potentially be, you're not leading. You're dictating over people. You're a tyrant,
mm.
and I wouldn't consider those individuals leaders.
Well, that's mostly what we have for formal leaders in modern America, right? Obviously, I think everybody's pretty keenly aware of that,
Sure.
and it's not unique to one political side or the other either. They're all pretty much pieces of shit, so far as I can tell. Now, from your perspective, what are some of the things? We're solution based here. What are some of the things that people can do to shield themselves from experiencing a lot of this nonsense?
What specifically? What nonsense do you mean?
Poor leadership, but also
Got it.
personal weakness. I mean, I think those are kind of the if you're looking through a mirror, you know what I mean. The poor leadership is, pretty much, or I'm sorry, the weak leadership and the personal weakness at the individual level. I think those are basically the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I would say the first thing, this goes back to something that we talked about earlier, is you need to identify where you've let your borders or your boundaries collapse in the past. And that's a really easy way to determine it because where have you been frustrated in the past with other people? Like a great example would be, let's say today I had a lot of plans I needed to do today. But at the end of the day, I was so frustrated with my kids because they kept barging into my office and they were asking me a bunch of questions and I couldn't get my work done. And then I ended up blowing a fuse and yelling at them. Okay. Like, what's the real problem? Is it your kids? No, they're kids, man. They have questions. They want to ask you questions. They love you. They want to spend time with you. They want to see what you're doing. They're curious. They're kids. Okay. The real problem is that you didn't have a boundary in place. And so one thing I do is I have this little plaque that goes on my door and it's a little do not disturb sign. And if that's on my door, because I've talked about it, my kids know that I'm probably doing something pretty important. It could be a podcast or I'm deeply engaged in doing something. If that thing is not on there, my door is closed, they can knock. If they knock and I answer, they can come in. If they knock and I don't answer, it means I can't answer it because I'm doing something. If it's open, free range, come on in. They know that because I've established that and I've talked about it with them. So what I would suggest to somebody, if they're worried about, are their boundaries being crossed? If you're getting bothered throughout the day, or you notice at the end of the day, you're very frustrated with other people, it's likely that those people aren't the problem and that you are. And you need to figure out why you're frustrated and what boundary you think should be there, but you haven't done a good job identifying what it is and then enforcing it.
Yeah, sure. And it's having like going through that process and having the conversation with the other party is going to produce one of two outcomes. One, you're both going to be clear, right, on what your expectation and their behavior should be, or you're going to get some new perspective from them that explains why they were behaving that way, and that might have been something that you needed to know in the first place, right?
So, definitely. May have been a misunderstanding.
Yeah, correct. So that communication process is a win-win, and it's a function of we just have no tolerance at all for discomfort in Western culture anymore. But having little simple conversations like that on the front end can save you so much ass ache on the back end. And if you think that, like I have, one of my Achilles heels is just to tolerate things because I'm used to being uncomfortable. I don't really care about that. That doesn't bother me at all. But it gets to a point where, all right, now I need you to shut the fuck up and get out of here because I got shit to do, or whatever the case is. But I'm so used to being uncomfortable that discomfort doesn't bother me to a degree that I don't do the extra bit of discomfort and say, hey, here's what I need from you, in a very blunt way. Right. That's always been my Achilles heel because I'm like my childhood was bullshit, and then I was in the military, so it's like, all right, cool, I can deal with this, and maybe you can. And I think it's it's important to know that about yourself, that you can absorb a lot of bullshit, but it's also important to understand that you're a human being. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a diminishing return on that at some point, and you need to kind of set some boundaries.
Well, and I think there are moments where we ought to show some grace, like tolerating bullshit, for example. If you've got a friend who's dealing with a hardship in his life, like maybe you don't need to keep those boundaries as intact. It's like midnight, it's 2 a.m. and you get a call from a buddy, and that buddy's never called you at 2 a.m. It's like, all right, my sleep's important, but something's up here. So yeah, I'm going to pull the wall down for a minute because this is a buddy of mine, but then there's other things. I had a friend come over, just drop by unannounced at my place a couple of weeks ago, which is fine. No problem. I was outside, dropped by unannounced. Cool. Glad to see him. But it was getting close to dinner time, and I really like to sit down with my family and eat dinner. And so we were shooting the breeze, talking about hunts, talking about this and that, nothing serious, nothing in depth, just talking, right? Looked at my watch. I'm like, oh, I know it's dinner time. I'm like, hey man, I'd love to sit here and chat a little bit, but dinner's important to me with my family. So let's catch up tomorrow or whatever. If you have a question or need anything, let me know. I'm going to go have dinner. Like, people can't do that because they don't respect themselves enough. It's like, no, I made and the problem is, it's like, not only, it's not really about them. It's, you're doing a disservice to your family that you said you're going to have dinner with.
And by the way, your buddy, like none of our friends are going to be for some reason, we think people are going to be butthurt about that. None of your friends are going to be like, oh, you want to spend time with your family? Well, fuck you, dude.
Yeah,
like, nobody would ever respond that way. No sane person, nobody that we would hang out with anyways would ever respond that way. But in the back of our head, it's just like, well, I don't want to be rude to this guy. it's
So I'll be
important.
rude to
So I'm
this
going to be rude to
these
my
people.
entire family, the people that I'm actually here
Right.
on earth for. That doesn't make any sense at all, but it happens all the time, right? Unless you're like
Well,
on
but
the
the
lookout for that.
yeah. Well, and the other thing is not only are they not going to be bothered by that, they're actually going to be inspired by that.
Sure. Yeah.
They're going to be like, "Oh, dude, I'm no problem. I actually need to be better about that myself." And yeah, you're right. It is dinner time. I better get home and be with my family
Yeah.
because that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah. I think
So you actually inspire people to have a spine.
I actually think that's one of the things of all the good work that's being done on the masculinity front, from, outdoorsmanship to, just philosophy centered around masculinity. One of the things that really needs to happen is more people making it cool to be dads. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we've got a fatherless dad, or I'm sorry, a fatherless little boy problem in America right now that's manifesting itself in a lot of different ways, from gang violence to mass shooting to suicide, and they're all symptoms of the same disease. It's an untailored, uncontrolled, uneducated, and untrained masculinity. This underlying rage that's designed by nature to make sure that we can protect what's important to us. But when it doesn't have direction and guidance and purpose and training, then it unleashes in very unpredictable sometimes, but often violent ways as well. And
Violent and self-destructive ways.
violent and
A lot
self-destructive,
of
yeah,
a lot of substance abuse
yeah,
issues, alcoholism,
sure,
which is something I've dealt with.
yep. But the solution to it is as simple as prioritizing male children,
Yeah,
not over female children. I just mean making
no,
sure that young male, like you and I, didn't really have good male role models growing up, but found them along the way. Luckily, right? Military helps, whatever the fuck.
yep,
But I would say that you and I might be exceptions to that rule. You know what I mean? Like
probably, yeah, probably.
most of the people I know, actually, it's a really interesting thing. One of the most common traits of an operator in the special operations community is they didn't have a good relationship with their dad, or their dad wasn't around, right? So people who are alpha, who realize that they're not getting that mentorship and go seek it out, right? But that's not common. Obviously, operators aren't very common. It's few and far between. And we've really allowed,
Lost your lights.
yeah, one of my light went out. Well, we'll just finish in the dark. How about that? Turn the brightness
Perfect.
on my screen up. That's not going to work.
It's gonna get weird. It's gonna go back to Drinking Bros podcast and getting weird, finish in the dark and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, maybe shit. Anyways, yeah. So it's like just refocusing efforts on that, being a dad to your little boy cool again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It used to be a thing.
Well, and that, but also in the community too. I haven't been as good at this, and I'm actually anxious to get back involved with coaching sports. Admittedly, I've got so inundated with my business and become a little distracted with my business that I've failed in that department. So I want to get back to coaching my kids' sports teams, but not only coaching them, but all the other little boys who don't have dads, who don't have a male presence at home, where they can actually be influenced positively by just having a coach in their life. Boy Scouts used to be, it's not anymore. It's kind of, we talked about that earlier, Boy Scouts, but it's lost a lot of its principled approach. But that was something that I spent time in, Boy Scouts, and I had great male leaders, sports, military. These are all ways that we can step up and serve. Even if you don't have a son, somebody said, sent me a message. This was probably like a year ago. And they said, my daughter's dating this guy and he's a jerk and he's this and he's that, or whatever. He's a young kid and he's full of himself. And what should I do to convince my daughter? I'm like, actually, what should you do to influence your potential future son?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because like you can try to talk your daughter out of dating this guy, but at the end of the day, why not be a father to him? Because he is going to be your son.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can put your arm around his shoulder and squeeze his shoulder, his trap a little bit, and get after him and say, hey man, come on now. Like, what are we going to do here? Let's get you going.
Yeah.
And actually father the young man.
I always say the same thing about like the bullying issue has been on everybody's mind in America for some time now. And I think we've made some pretty critical errors in the way we approached it. The first thing that we fucked up was treating the victim like a victim, because that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
You're a parent of multiple children. You know that if a toddler falls down and you rush over to console them, they're going to cry more for the attention. You know what I mean?
Of course.
They're going to
Yeah.
become less resilient as a human being because of that. Now, I'm not saying you should ignore victims. You should certainly walk over to them and say, "Hey, you good? All right, carry on."
Get back to it.
But I believe the more important part of that process is to walk over to the bully and say, "Hey, bud, what's up? Why are you doing this?" Because nobody does that shit for no reason, right? That aggression doesn't manifest itself like that without some kind of impetus. It's just the way human beings work. And that kid is either going to turn into a net positive or net negative for society. And anytime you witness that and have the ability to interdict and mentor a little bit and comfort and maybe solve some problems for them, you've now created a force multiplier. Because I guarantee you, somebody that gets that kind of attention and pulls themselves out of that shit will do it for other people. That's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea of force multiplier, and that's the legacy. I mean, that's even this weekend as we're doing our event's called Legacy Event. It's like, how do you take what you know and take your experiences, positive and negative, and turn those into positive influences for your children, and then who they go out and impact, and how do they affect the world? And that goes back to the principle you're talking about: is adding more than you take away. Produce versus consume. Like, we're all consumers,
Sure.
and there's nothing wrong with consumption, but you should always put more back into the system than you take out of it. Otherwise, it's just not sustainable, right? You can only do that for so long.
Yep, absolutely right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. I know you got to get out of here and take your kids to the fair. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before you roll? Tell them where they can find you, where to find the book and stuff.
Yeah, Masculinity Manifesto is the book. Again, I'm realizing I didn't write it for you. I wrote it for myself, but maybe you'll get some benefit from it. It's called the Masculinity Manifesto. It comes out on the 27th of September. Outside of that, you can find me on all the socials at Order of Man or at Ryan Michler.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you all listening. This has been Citizen.